Welcome, class. You ever stop and wonder why a bottle of water costs next to nothing, but a tiny little diamond costs a fortune? Or how a company, say like Apple, figures out the exact number of iPhones they should make? Well, today, we are going to decode the fundamental rules of the market that answer those exact questions.
Here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute basics. I mean, what even is a market? And then we'll build our way up to the two golden rules that every single business, from your local coffee shop to a giant corporation, has to live by. All right, let's dive in.
But hang on. Before we can even start analyzing markets, we have to ask an even more basic question. Why do they exist in the first place? And it all boils down to one single core concept: value.
So in economics, we talk about two kinds of value. First, there's value in use. This is all about utility. And let's be honest, nothing is more useful for survival than water. But in the world of business and markets, we are obsessed with value in exchange. It's all about what you can trade something for. And this is where a diamond, which has very little practical use, really shines. It's all about its price, what someone is actually willing to pay for it.
Now, this definition right here is absolutely crucial. A market isn't just a physical spot like a grocery store. Nope, it's any system. It could be Amazon's website, the New York Stock Exchange, or even a classified ad in a newspaper. Anywhere that lets buyers and sellers connect and agree on a price. I want you to think of these as the 5 essential ingredients for a market to exist. You got to have buyers and sellers, the people. You need a product, the thing being traded. There has to be some kind of bargaining, the process. Both sides need knowledge about what's going on. And out of all that, a single price emerges at that specific moment in time.
Okay, so we know what a market is, but, not all markets are the same. Not by a long shot. Economists love to classify them to make sense of all the chaos. It's kind of like how a library organizes books by genre. It just gives us a clear framework for analysis.
So we can look at pretty much any market through these 6 different lenses to get a really good handle on how it operates. Let's kick things off with geography and scale.
A market's boundaries can be physical, or they can be based on the sheer scale of the business. For example, your neighborhood bakery serves a local market for fresh bread. But something like gold? That's traded on a massive international market. And in the same way, when a car company buys tons of steel, they're operating in the wholesale market. But when you go buy a single chocolate bar, you're in the retail market. The great economist Alfred Marshall pointed out that time changes everything. Just think about it. Let's say a new celebrity diet makes fish super popular, like overnight. Well, the fishermen can't just magically pull more fish out of the ocean that same day. The supply is fixed. So what happens? The price goes through the roof. But give them a few months, what we call the long period, and they can buy bigger boats, hire more people, and totally adjust their supply to meet that new demand.
Markets are also defined by their rules. When you buy your lunch, that's a spot market. You pay your cash, you get your food right then and there. But when a farmer agrees today on a price for a crop that he's going to deliver 6 months from now, that's a futures market. And of course, some markets, like the stock market, are super heavily regulated, while your local farmer's market is pretty much a free-for-all.
Now, of all these different ways to classify markets, the most important one, especially for your exams, is based on competition. This single factor dictates a company's entire strategy, from how it sets prices to whether it even needs to bother with advertising.
So, if you want to understand why a business does what it does, you have to answer 2 simple questions first. 1, how many other sellers are there? And 2, how similar are their products? I promise you, the answers to these 2 questions will tell you almost everything you need to know. This table right here just lays it all out perfectly. Let's just walk through it. On the far left, you've got perfect competition. Imagine thousands of farmers all selling identical wheat. They have zero, and I mean zero, control over the market price. Now jump to the complete opposite end, the far right, you've got a monopoly. Think of one pharmaceutical company that has the patent for a life-saving drug. They have almost total control over the price. And pretty much every other business you can think of, restaurants, airlines, cell phone providers, they all fall somewhere in the middle. All right, so before we can really dig into how these firms behave in those different market structures, we have to learn to speak their language. And that language is the language of revenue. It is the financial lifeblood of any company. These are the 3 numbers every single manager is watching like a hawk. Total revenue is the big one, all the cash coming in the door. Average revenue, well, that's just a fancy way of saying the price. But the really important one for making decisions is marginal revenue. It answers the question, how much extra cash did we bring in from selling that one single last item. Now, look really closely at what happens here. To sell that second unit, the firm has to drop its price from 10 down to 9. Now, this is the part that trips people up. They didn't just sell the second unit for 9. To make that happen, they had to sell the first one for 9 too. So while that second unit brought in $9, they lost $1 on that first unit. So 9 minus that lost dollar gives you a marginal revenue of 8. See how that works?
And that little piece of math leads us to this fundamental rule. Why is marginal revenue always less than the price? It's because to sell one more thing, you usually have to drop the price, not just on that new item, but on all the other ones you could have sold for more. It's that loss on the previous units that makes the extra gain smaller than the new price.
Okay, we have built our foundation. We understand markets, we understand revenue. Now let's get to the main event, the two universal principles that guide every single firm's decisions, no matter what market they're in. These two rules answer the two biggest questions any producer has. First, should we even bother opening for business today? That's the shutdown rule. If the price you can get for your product doesn't even cover the cost of the raw materials to make it, you're literally better off just staying closed. The second question is, okay, we're open. How much should we make? That's the profit maximization rule. You keep making one more unit, as long as the extra money you get from it is more than the extra cost to make it. And you stop at the exact point where the revenue from that very next unit would equal its cost. Not one more, not one less.
All right, let's pull everything together. We're going to do a quick-fire revision of all the key points we've covered. This is perfect for some last-minute exam prep.
So let's recap the basics. We're always talking about scarce goods. We care about their value in exchange, their price. And the market is just any place or system where that price gets determined, as long as it has those 5 core elements.
Then we saw how to classify all the different kinds of markets, focusing on those 4 main competitive structures that really dictate how a firm behaves. And finally, the big ones. We learned the language of revenue and the 2 golden rules that every firm lives by: when to shut down and exactly how much to produce to make the most profit.
And that wraps up our deep dive on markets. But I'll leave you with a final thought. Our models are clean. They say produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. But think about it. Does a manager at a giant car factory really know the exact cost of making the 10,001th car or the extra revenue it'll bring? How do these neat economic theories actually hold up in the messy, unpredictable reality of running a real business? That's something to chew on.